of children. And secondly, they speak to addressing a number of disproportionate interventions that could be likely if care and attention is not given to the care and protection of children, and which then run the risk of children becoming entrenched in the criminal justice system. And as the chairman of the committee that examined these two pieces of legislation and that heard from a number of persons and institutions contributing, I must say first and foremost that this particular piece of legislation attracted less attention than the Child Protection Bill. So that, as you heard earlier this morning from the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs when he presented, there were really 3 points of discussion that took up most of the consideration of this particular piece. So it would suggest that otherwise the bill was found to be fair and acceptable in the eyes of many. And the one aspect that as chair I would speak to is that which was also examined in the presentation of the bill here under the report this morning. But in speaking, and that's the point of diversion. But in addressing that, I think it's important for us to understand that the issue of diversion, or in seeking to satisfy the objectives of the suite of legislation that were examined at committee level, it's important for us to understand that it's not just going to be the Ministry of People Empowerment in the case of child protection, or it's not just going to be the Ministry of Home Affairs as it relates to the Child Justice Bill, but these two pieces must form part of a holistic approach of government, what we will call a whole of government approach to determining interventions that ensure that this nation's children do not find themselves in the criminal justice system. So it requires coordination, yes, with people empowerment, the Ministry of People Empowerment. It requires, these two pieces require coordination with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Education. They require coordination, Mr. Speaker, to address a number of social factors that when we examine the Child Protection Bill, we recognize quite easily can bring children into the need of care and protection. And now that we examine the Child Justice Bill, there's a need to address social factors that can propel children into the child justice system. And what do I mean when I say this? What social factors could be a consideration? Food and nutrition, or better put, the lack of nutrition. Housing insecurity. Unemployment. Mr. Speaker, generally when we speak, the conditions that one would generally associate with poverty requires a whole of government approach, a holistic approach if the suite of legislation, the two pieces before us, are to achieve all that they are to achieve. So it's against the backdrop of this recognition, sir, that my comments are interestingly focused on the concept of diversion. I must admit, Mr. Speaker, that until having to examine the piece of legislation, that the concept was not one that was familiar to me. But having had the opportunity to read, and not only read the pieces of legislation, but also to delve for a deeper meaning into what diversion is really intended to achieve, I am satisfied, Mr. Speaker, that it must be It must be considered and embedded into all the services and all the ministries that I made reference to previously. We established under the Child Protection Bill that all children will not require care and protection. Most parents, most households are able, commendably, to provide for the care and protection of children. Very similarly, there will not be all children that will come into the system where reform of criminal law will become applicable to them. But regrettably, Mr. Speaker, some children do come into conflict with the law. Of course, when we had our discussions with the Child Care Board and so on, we found, and I don't have the evidence, the empirical evidence to substantiate it, but from those who are professionals, they were able to assure us that most children who come into conflict with the law will be engaged in low-level offenses. In other words, offenses that can be corrected and can see behaviors being curtailed with sometimes little intervention or even no legal intervention at all. Because only a small number of young people, it is found, Mr. Speaker, will continue to offend. Diversion as a concept was therefore interesting to us in committee because we recognize it as an opportunity to support our young people. Support our young people who, like the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, who in recalling some of his experiences are not bad, essentially, but are just youth in need of the proper direction to bring them back on track. The principle of diversion provides young people or children, and here under this piece of legislation, as the Honourable Member who led stated clearly, it deals with children over the age of 12. So it is to provide young children over the age of 12 with opportunities to get better support, that they can make better choices for themselves and ultimately contribute to society. Because if we have a system of justice that just examines any form of conflict with the law, of one which merits some detention and the stigmatization and so on that will follow, we see very clearly that we are setting up for a system that makes people feel, well, I already bad, they already think that I ain't a good, so I ain't gonna try. Or that it puts you into a system where you have to be waiting until maybe people forget. Because in our criminal justice system, just like many across the world, you may have opportunities for expungement, but people in a small society don't forget you. And once people fall into the hands of a system, therefore, the likelihood of stigmatization that will follow young offenders into adulthood is there. And that's why we spent some time, because we even considered if the current provision for diversion was a provision that best suited the objective that we were seeking to achieve. Like, should they come before a judge at all? Or should they have to appear in a court setting? And we were satisfied then that, well, engagement at the level of a magistrate may indeed be necessary in some circumstances to make determinations that there's sufficient opportunity that appearing in a court of law would not have to be the case necessarily. Mr. Speaker, as we examine this concept and we engage the Bar Association and we engage other people who commented, we were more and more satisfied as a committee that this was indeed a good thing that expresses the commitment of the government and the framers of the legislation, in particular to be proactive Proactive in the sense that the state is seeking to intervene in those cases where behavior, or in those cases before behavior becomes extreme. And proactive in the sense that a child is provided with the opportunity to redirect his or her behavior, and for their parents to assist in redirecting their behavior. And I speak of proactive behavior, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps I should be a little cautious in this regard as I speak of proactive steps to curtail criminal activity. For you see, Mr. Speaker, there's some who, for reasons only known to them, and who sometimes, perhaps for the purpose of scoring cheap political points, may wish to criticize interventions that are aimed at being proactive and that are aimed at correcting behaviors before they get too far out of hand, and who perhaps would like to see everybody being thrown behind bars. So whether such proactive action on the part of a system is by way of diversion, or whether proactive action is through a national peace program, there are those who would throw cold water, basically, on the efforts that are only aimed to ensure that the criminal justice system is not one that just targets to punish, but that it really targets, as this piece of legislation provides for, to correct, course correct, and assist in the development of our children. I'm speaking, Mr. Speaker, and speaking on the Child Protection Bill, I caution those of us in this honorable chamber to be careful of a number of things. I not only caution those of us in this honorable chamber, but in speaking to well-meaning citizens who are interested in being constructive and are genuinely interested in the development of this country and genuinely interested in the promotion of our democracy. I cautioned us of the need to beware of disorder. And I feel the need, Mr. Speaker, to issue that caution again, especially in the light of some of the things that we heard coming from the opposition over the weekend. Because if we get in the minds of those people that we are trying to course correct or engage in course correction, that there is still a view out there that no matter what good is being done as an intervention is not good enough because there's a characterization of you as being the same yesterday as you are today, then the efforts, Mr. Speaker, the efforts of, or the well-meaning efforts can very well be undermined. I caution of the need for us to be aware of anarchists that will preach democracy, but when you study the actions that they're only aimed at promoting disorder in this country. And I say that against the backdrop of the need, therefore, for us not only to speak in this honorable chamber, and I'm speaking to parliamentarians, to speak in this honorable chamber on the merits of the pieces of legislation. Because the reality is that we go through this exercise and it doesn't meet with many that are out there who will not hear the arguments and debates put in this chamber, but will more likely hear the call-in program and will more likely hear the roadside parliaments and the like. But I caution those of us in this honorable chamber to see it as our responsibility within our various ministries, within the various organizations that we have responsibility for, to speak to the merits of the legislation, make our constituents, different constituents, I'm not only speaking at the level of parochial politics, but the different segments of the society with which we come in contact, not only speak about the pieces of legislation, but to understand exactly what the suite of legislation is intending to do. And the ultimate objective is to protect our children. So I go back, therefore, to the need for us to examine how the Ministry of Housing and its work will also work in diversion. If children are in insecure housing, it breeds a kind of negative response that may not always lead to criminal activity, but it can very well lead to criminal activity. And I'm sure you're understanding what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. If children lack food nutrition, if they don't have anything to eat or sufficient to eat, that in itself is a trigger for some of the behaviors that we are trying to divert. And I go back to the Child Protection Bill only because these two pieces of legislation, well parented by different ministries, go hand in hand, as we heard last week and we heard again today. The fundamental objective of the child protection legislation wasn't to take children from their parents, but it was to make sure that the care and protection of children was paramount, which means interventions geared at the care and protection of children before the need even, if at all, to move a child from its environment. So housing, food nutrition, making sure that there's equality in education, that is what this government has to commit to. So to my colleagues who have spoken so well in terms of their contributions to the bill, within your ministries, many of you who have portfolio, within your ministries, then the obligation is not only to see the legislation passed, but to see how holistically we can work to ensure that the pieces have the meaning, and in particular as it relates to the child justice bill, that through diversion of criminal influences and coming into the conflict with the law is something that is upheld. Mr. Speaker, coordination, therefore, through the broader system that must center and cater to children's developmental needs. As I said, Mr. Speaker, outside of the issue of diversion, there were very few serious comments that came before the committee on this particular piece of legislation. But there was another concern over the fact that if a minister, or if it was determined or felt that a child has served or spent enough time going through corrective treatment, guidance, counseling to correct course, as we like to say, if it was felt that before the allocated time of corrective action, the child showed that she could go back to the family and that the program of correction could end, that the minister would have the powers to make that determination. And we spent a lot of time trying to ensure that while it may be understood that the minister has to be acting under the guidance of different agencies, out of an abundance of caution, that we got that being made very clear that the minister will be acting under the recommendation of the director and the staff, the professional staff at the respective agencies. And why that's important to highlight is because in many instances, in many different pieces of legislation that comes before this honorable chamber, there is a preoccupation with the power and authority that a minister will have in making decisions. So the issue, that issue was quite commendably resolved at committee, and therefore we commend the amendments there as those which lend to greater clarification of the intent, the particular intent. Mr. Speaker, I will not go into the whole link to the UN system and the concerns that were expressed, because those were the same concerns expressed under the Child Protection Bill as well. But suffice it to say that the Child Justice Bill that is the subject of debate in the report today, when taken alongside the Child Protection Bill, we don't imagine as a committee, even although we took pains to go through all the elements and clause by clause, we don't imagine that this piece of legislation or these two pieces of legislation are in themselves perfect. But what we are satisfied with is that we have been very laser-like in trying to weigh as many pros and cons as were available to us for consideration at the time. And we want to assure the public there may be aspects where gaps may still be evident to some. And we want to lend the assurance that in this honorable chamber, we don't only pass pieces of legislation and leave them there, but we always engage in a process actively of looking to strengthen legislation wherever it needs to be strengthened. But there's a saying that the enemy of the good is perfection. And sometimes in our effort to get a perfect document, we delay the good objectives or undermine the good objectives that are intended by legislation. And so it would have been the hope of many of us that these two pieces of legislation could have been passed in Parliament without going through the rigor of a joint select committee process. But I'm sure that coming out of it, that all of us can see the value again of the joint select committees in allowing the public, the parts of the public that really meaningfully want to engage and have their voices linked in a way that will make a difference, that they can participate meaningfully in shaping the pieces of legislation in this country, not only as it relates to these, maybe this one was the first in standing committee, but there will be opportunities for other pieces of legislation that comes under the Social and Environmental Committee and under the other two committees of Parliament. And we, again, encourage every member of the public that sees it fit, and we encourage them to see it fit where there is disagreement or some kind of divergence between the opinions and what we have brought before this honorable chamber, to make it their responsibility as citizens of this country to come forward and have us engage, because I think that all of us engaging will only strengthen what there is and allow the kind of development and forward thinking that all of us are looking forward to. So with these words, Mr. Speaker, I commend the Child Justice Bill in the same way I did the Child Protection Bill. Thank you.
Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable.
I will be short, I promise, just a few comments. Mr. Speaker, I essentially have no real issues with the bill. I just want to make, as I said, a few comments and perhaps place a few questions on the table. 5 minutes of your time. Concerns around, I want to speak about the educational aspect to some extent, health, and the legal part of it in terms of the bill. With respect to the education system, I think I'm aware that the legislation speaks to those below 18 years of age, but I have a burning concern. I think I brought it up with the Honourable Member for St. Michael South. South. I had an experience of a 16-year-old young lady walk into my office recently, and it's always useful to use examples for memory's sake. But this child, as I call her, was essentially abandoned by her parents, who were not born here, but they were citizens of Barbados and moved back to their previous home and left this child here with her grandmother. She perhaps had some issues growing up with school and everything, but now I have a 16-year-old in front of me, no parents, no grandparents to speak of, and is now seeking the protection, quote unquote, of what she calls an adult boyfriend. I brought it up with the Honourable Member because of concern. I am concerned of what I am to do with this child. She's trying to get back into school, and that does not seem to be an option. If we're talking about the protection of the child, individuals like this need to be a part of the process. I need to know what to do with this young lady. Where can I send her? And calling the child care board was a no. They had nothing to offer for me, but yet the legislation speaks of all those below 18. So maybe someday soon, something will come up so that we can look after these children between this tender age. They're not adult, and yet they're not children. And this is one of my major concerns on the part of her. And there are others like her. All are not physically well or mentally well, but the dilemma I have, the geriatric system, they're too young for. The what we call the facilities for children, they're too old for. And then there's this group of people, some of them may be mentally incapacitated with elderly parents, and they have nowhere for help to look after these children. Yes, there are a few schools out there, but the good ones, I don't want to say good, but the fact is there are some good, there are some not so good, are expensive. Some of them can't be related. I think we have to start looking at not only the elderly in the population, not only the ones below 12, but this in-between age where they're not quite adult and they're not quite children. I am a proponent, more or less, for the underdog. And if we speak about protection, it brings to mind the situation with the Lester Vaughan School. And what struck me there is when the head boy of the school so eloquently put it, that if that school were a Harrison College or Queen's College, there would have been provision, adequate and timely provision, for them to do their exams and their school-based assessments. And I wonder how fair the playing field is in terms of protection, because in a sense, this is still protection of the child. We have to protect their future. Exams will always be a part of life. From birth to death, there's always some form of exam. And these are my concerns, that the playing field is not entirely level. For all schools, we have schools where the plants are miserable, and the opportunities for the children at one school sometimes pale in comparison to those in another school. And I have said this several times. Not getting anywhere, but I will keep saying it. A child in a school, for instance, in my constituency, deserves to have as much support and opportunity as a child from a more urban constituency, for instance. These are issues that I consider to be justice and protection. If we have to talk about justice and protection, there are children. I think the Honourable Member of St. George North alluded to it, where every family cannot afford a child. I have known of instances where children did well in primary school, and primary school is a different beast. Primary school seems to be an environment where it's more of a family environment. Everybody looks after one another. Oftentimes it's within a district. And then they enter secondary school, they did well, say, and the reality is people consider doing well as Harrison College, the older secondary schools. You hit the older secondary schools, and then they haven't got the support. Can't get the books, can't afford the computers. And oftentimes these people just drop off. Many of them don't enter a line of life of crime. Some of them just don't have the opportunity. They end up in jobs that they obviously have way better potential for. These are my concerns if we are to speak of the protection and justice for children. Some schools, and I have brought this up before, not in Parliament, but I'm concerned with some schools not having the support of counselors. Yes, we saw at the end of, I don't want to see, we know what I mean by the end of COVID, when COVID had abated to some extent. And we had issues with fighting in schools and bullying and yada, yada, yada. But there's some individuals within the school system, both primary and secondary, that do not have they won't fight. The issue will be they have problems at home, they won't speak, they're depressed, and I really don't think the school system is outfitted enough with enough counselors. They think they're supposed to be coming on board. But I have had instances where the child would tell me, I feel like killing myself. The obvious referral, of course, is psychiatric hospital. But we need to put more backing if we are to protect these children from depression and anxiety. We need more backing. We need to look at this kind of thing. I move on now to the legal part of it. And my concern as a medical doctor, as a mother, as a human being, really, is and I've heard about the addressing of the backlog. I appreciate the thought and the sentiment. But I have seen cases where minors are raped, whether by family members, stranger, or even a parent, abused. I've taken the pains to fill out a police form. I've taken the pains sometimes to call in the police because that's the procedure. And then I sit and wait for the court case to come up. I have had instances where it took, 7 years? We gotta do better. I have had people that are now in their 20s and have come to the conclusion that the issue was their fault. We cannot allow our children, ergo adults, to go through this. The system has to do better. Is nothing more heart-wrenching to see a 6-year-old being abused, and you sit and wait for a case to come up. 12 years later, they're adults and got fed up, can't remember well, and it's essentially thrown out. These are some of my issues with that. We need to have a few more. The truth is, I don't know how many there are now, but a few more females in the police force that can deal with some of these cases. I have had instances where you have a little girl and a mother crying, and we can't find a male doctor. I was not a police physician, but I took it upon myself to see her refusing to have the police doctor come because we just can't handle it. We have to look at the support system in terms of the police force, the legal system. Have more females in session. That's important. More female doctors. The other thing I have to speak about, and as I said, it'll be short, is along the health line. Right now, doctors are foggy, and I have been foggy for 26 years, 27 nearly, on how to treat individuals below 17 who come in with reproductive health issues. You don't know if you have the backing if you give them contraception without a parent present or guardian. You don't know if they come with an adult who have no relationship to them, if we have support, if we treat these children. You don't know if they come alone and pregnant, where we can go. And of course, it's first, do no harm. I appreciate that. But something needs to be put in place along with all this legislation in terms of health to make it clear to us on where we need to go, how we need to treat these individuals, because it's important. Yes, we want to increase the population, but that's not the way to do it. We should have the leeway with the legal backing to treat these individuals and give them what they need. And speaking to doctors, we really don't know where to go on that end. I treat to some extent, but yet I have in the back of my mind, suppose somebody sues me. Suppose somebody sues me. That has to be put in legislation properly. And the last point that I need to talk about is the follow-up from here. Where do we go from here? I'm hearing about the Honourable Member, the Acting Attorney General that presented it, speak about the care centers, which I'm happy for. I would never like to see a situation like those ever come up in my lifetime or another lifetimes, ever again. And I'm happy to see that we're taking more care in terms of how we choose these individuals, these places, and hopefully the people that work into them. What about the halfway houses? Mr. Speaker, I left my mother's house, some might be laziness, at 34 years old. I cannot say that if I were turned out at 18 years old, that I have a clue. The process of adulthood is a learning experience. You cannot put a child in an institution for care because they have nowhere else to go and then let them out at 18 years old and expect them to fend for themselves. I can even go to the doctor without mommy being beside me. True. And I still see people that come in, 24-year-old people that come with a mother to see me. What is a child that is brought up in an institution to do? At some point, Somerville had the halfway houses. I pass them every day, I'm not sure what's happening. But we need some halfway, quarterway, some way to transition these people more smoothly into society, where they can go to the banks and open an account, where they know how to budget, to shop at the supermarket. That is something that's fundamentally missing from how we treat these children. Fundamentally missing. Basically, that is what my contribution is. I had those concerns and I felt it was appropriate to voice it here. Other than that, I have no issues with the legislation. I make it a habit, like some people, to listen to what's going on out there. Whether it's bad or good, you can always learn from society. And I maintain that. You cannot know what the opposing voice is unless you hear it, so that you can refute it. And that is where I stand on the matter, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for your 5-10 minutes of listening of your ear. Thanks a lot.
Honourable Member St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like my colleague, I intend to be brief. My submission today, I'm going to try to be pragmatic as far as this is concerned. The honourable member from St. Philip North asks, where do we go from here? Mr. Speaker, I fully support the bill. Let me say that from the very inception. But I want to look at another view as it relates to this. I believe Chalk Dust, there's a song by Chalk Dust called The Prison Factory, where he speaks, or he's singing about how they make another one. And I want to suggest, Mr. Speaker, and inside of the document, diversion is a major part of it. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, and I may get some licks for this outside of Parliament, but these are my views. The honourable member from the city, I was at a launch recently dealing with parenting. And I think too often in this country, the process of baby making is flawed. I have a way of flawed, trust me, flawed. Like I said, Chalky talk about making another one. Let me say, because I'm in here, selective feeding. Persons can substitute words if they want to. We have a situation, Mr. Speaker, where I believe as a parent that I have a certain amount of influence on my children. I believe that children should be influenced by the personality of their parents. My son had an opportunity to be exposed to gambling, to be exposed to smoking and all of these things. And I said to him, but why you never travel this road? And he said, because of you, Daddy. And I'm saying that the pretty boy syndrome, the pretty girl syndrome that we see where we believe, oh, we must copulate, and the end result is a child. And the persons who would tell you, oh, the Lord do not allow children to suffer. I agree. But the people who are carrying the title of parents are the ones that are allowing them to suffer. And hence you have a situation that we talk about, oh, this particular youngster got involved in problems because of peer pressure. Peer pressure because another youngster who had some issues or problems in terms of those people that carry the title of mother and father did not do what they were supposed to do. Now, I am not in any way talking about utopia because I am not speaking about perfection. I know it don't exist. But I'm saying that we need to look at it in terms of how do we get our young people at a stage where they understand that who is supposed to be my child's father, who's supposed to be my child's mother, we're looking and we have check boxes. Mr. Speaker, check boxes don't happen anymore, you know. I have 3 children, and I had the discussion with them because I believe that at the end of the day, my grandchildren should be in a certain vein. And I know, like I said, I might probably get lashes for this outside, but I need to speak my truth in relation to this. Fortunately, we have a government that is proactive, very, very proactive in terms. Last week, the Honourable Member from St. Michael's South brought the Child Protection Bill. This week, the Honourable Member from Christchurch East is here with the Child Justice Bill. And one of the problems on this island as well, Minister, is something that is known, something that we call bystanders effect. So we see little children who are walking down the wrong path, and what do? We take out our cameras and we take pictures to show, well, look, this 12-year-old school child was fighting with another one and had a scissors or had a knife and stabbed this other one, instead of intervening and saying, look, you're walking down the wrong path. Only last week, Mr. Speaker, I went, and person said to me, you know, you should have gone to the police station. I'm not sure exactly what I would have reported, but maybe I should have. I went to the gas station by the Globe to purchase something, and a youngster came in and said to me, whatever direction you're going in, I need a ride. And I'm like, this guy is mad or smoking rum. I said to him, no, got my stuff, went outside, and when I got outside, the youngster had a knife in his hand, and he was in the company of 2 other males, no older than probably 18 years old. 18 years old. The youngster, one of the other youngsters had either a scissors or a knife protruding out of his pocket. I took pictures because I was concerned, and I took pictures of the 3 of them there. But I'm saying that we need to have a situation in this country where everybody feels it is necessary to get involved with our young people. I have been tasked with leading the Ministry of Youth, and every day I write hard in terms of trying to come up with new initiatives along with the team in Sky Mall to come to deal with the diversion process. We look at the block culture. I have worked for 4 years consistently on the block, and when I exited the program, I saw youngsters from primary school level gravitating to the blocks. And I'm suggesting, Mr. Speaker, that these things are wrong. How do you get a parent with a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and saying to you, I can't get this child controlled? And I go back to what I said before, selective feeding. Mr. Speaker, look, again, we are doing what is necessary as a government through my ministry at community level to ensure that programs are in place for our young people. I mentioned the Honourable Member for the city and his parenting program, but I think a parenting program is coming after the birth, Mr. Speaker. And we need a program to educate our youngsters who are looking to get involved in parenthood, like I said, to be able to check boxes, because if we don't do that, then Chalky's song is going to be very, very relevant. We're going to continue to make another one, and another one, and another one. Not speaking about utopia, not speaking about perfection, but we need to be able to have that serious conversation with our young people. And we're doing all of the necessary consultations in the ministry. We're having programs on an annual basis, sometimes twice a year, where we hear feedback from our young people and provide them with information. We have youth officers who are putting projects together to engage our young people. Diversion. But it cannot be a situation where the bystanders effect continue to kick in and we expect a different result. All of us who are able to intervene in the lives of these young people need to reach out, need to reach down, and believe that we have a vested interest. Because last week I mentioned about these same young people rocking the cradle of our future, and we have that important role to play in terms of how we treat to it going forward. Mr. Speaker, I believe that, the honourable member from St. Philip North spoke about those persons who are exiting the system at 18. I, like her, I don't believe that they're ready. One of the things that feeds the block culture is the fact of overcrowding in households and the need to be outside with somebody who is showing love. Mr. Speaker, it all boils down to this thing of parenting. I may be wrong, but I'm suggesting from my perch as Minister of Youth, from my perch of working on the ground as a youth officer for 20 plus years, that we need to curtail it, and then the honourable member from Christchurch East would have less issues in terms of having a feeder program, and forgive me for calling it that, a feeder program into GIS, a feeder program into the senior Dodge prison. So, Mr. Speaker, I said I would be brief. I wanted to share my thoughts on this, and I believe that these are things that if we do as a collective, if we do these things as an individual, if we do these things at community level, and then it goes up to the macro level, where we all look out. Prime Minister talked about seeing people and feeling people. And I hope that this is something that resonates across the nation, because it is not happening now. It is happening in patches, but it is not happening at a large enough scale for us to impact and have the type of results that we're looking for. Like I said, Child Protection Bill, it is there. The honourable member from St. Andrew last week mentioned it, and I too asked if it is a case that statutory rape is just another thing now for TikTok on this island. Because the reality is that we see those youngsters, 13, 14 and so pregnant, and we say it as a norm, and we throw a pity party. Oh, I'm sad to see this. But we got to move past the pity party and get involved at that personal level. And if all of us do that, then my job as Minister of Youth is going to be made so much easier, because we have more hands on deck that are looking to guide our next generation. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the bill before Parliament here today, the Child Justice Bill. And I think it's essential, sir, as the immediate past Home Affairs Minister, to give a background on the issue and to contextualize what we are debating today. This bill, when it becomes law by proclamation, signature of the President, will repeal two extremely outdated pieces of legislation, sir. One, the Reformatory Industrial Schools Act, 1926, and then the Juvenile Offenders Act of 1932. Both of these acts essentially passed in this Parliament 100 years ago. Very few Barbadians were alive when these two pieces of legislation were passed. We were in a colonial state, sir, not that far past slavery. The conditions of our people, black people in this country, were essentially not much better than they were during slavery. It was just, of course, after the First World War, in which Barbados, as a colony of England, was involved and Barbadians fought. It was a situation, of course, before the 1937 riots and the subsequent Mon Commission, which spoke about the depraved and the humiliating conditions that black people lived in this country, sir. So within that context, those two pieces of legislation were passed to essentially keep children, black children, where they were, in the station where they were born. So they had flogging. You could be put in the detention center, whatever it was called then, sir, because you were on the road begging, because you were asking for alms, as they called them at that time, because you were in a social and housing environment where prostitutes, that's the word used, lived and went on, because your father was convicted of sexual offenses involving young girls, all of that could automatically land you in a detention center, sir. And the law there, then, and it was unconstitutional, and we still have the law today up to when this act now becomes law. Certainly unconstitutional, and when I was Minister of Home Affairs, it troubled me tremendously that the minimum sentence for a child to go to government industrial school, DODS, was 3 years. A magistrate had no discretion to sentence a child to less than 3 years. Minimum 3, maximum 5. Had to be unconstitutional, must be unconstitutional. And I've spoken with you on previous occasions, Honourable Speaker. You know that we've spoken and discussed this because it doesn't happen for adults. For adults, a judicial officer has a discretion, whether the judicial officer is a magistrate or a judge, to sentence on conviction an adult to less than 3 years. But here we are sentencing children, 13 and 14 years old, to a minimum of 3 years in a detention center. Absolutely unconstitutional. And it's really, sir, an indictment, I must say, sir. And if you can't speak freely in this parliament, you can't speak freely anywhere on previous governments, previous administrations, sir, that today, which should have happened long, long time ago, has finally only now come. There was a 3-day conference, sir, in April 2015 under the last administration where child justice reform was discussed. So I think funded by the United Nations, representatives from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States were present, and in fact, a model OECS bill was constructed and crafted, sir, which some of the countries in the OECS have used to pass legislation already. So Antigua has similar legislation in 2015, St. Vincent in 2019, St. Lucia in 2021. But we lagged behind. And the model legislation was there. So when I became Minister of Home Affairs, a document was brought to me shortly afterwards. It was called a Juvenile Justice Bill. That's what it was known under the last administration. And I was told that this bill was lagging on the then Home Affairs, the former Home Affairs Minister's desk under the last government, the then member for St. Philip South, for about 2 or 3 years, and he did nothing about it, like he forgot that the bill was there post this 2015 April conference. And when you look at the files, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East would have seen, in February, suddenly it seemed like if the Honourable, the then member for St. Philip South, like his leader, woke up from his slumber and said, but look, this bill needs to go to Parliament. And the cabinet in February 2018, then gave approval for this bill to go to cabinet. But of course, by February 2018, in fact, the last administration was already over time, was past its 5 years, and in March, I believe, within a couple of weeks after that, we walked out. Opposition members of parliament said we're not coming back because this is ridiculous. 5 years is accepted as the time frame for a period between elections, and we are not condoning this. So the then Minister of Home Affairs had no opportunity to carry out the mandate at the 12th hour of his cabinet to bring that bill before Parliament. So we found a situation then when I, as Home Affairs Minister, was given the authority by Cabinet. In fact, Cabinet set up a Cabinet subcommittee on child justice and on child protection to look at these bills. And they had quite a few ministers. I led that subcommittee, quite a few ministers on the committee, and public officers as well from all the departments, probation, obviously government, industrial, school, etc., with a view to getting this in. In May 2019, I would have taken a paper to Cabinet, and Cabinet approved in principle this bill, the Child Justice Bill, but said that we had to now see how we're going to implement the bill, because it was bringing fundamental changes to the legislative platform of child justice. And also, of course, even after then, we would have got the assistance from the United Nations, UNICEF it was, who paid for a consultant to do a framework, written framework on how to implement this bill. We were held up because the child protection wasn't ready, as we heard last week as well. Because then the child protection bill also, at least that legislative framework, also got a consultant to assist them. That consultant was a Barbadian, Mrs. Jackie Burke, Seeley Burke, who lives in Grenada, a child rights expert, known throughout the OECS, and she would have helped then with the child protection legislative framework. So that is the background. And the reason why this, I suppose, is only now coming to Parliament 9 years to the month, because it was May 2019 that the Cabinet approved this legislation. When I read it through this morning, again, sir, it wasn't that much different from what I left behind when I demitted office as Home Affairs Minister. But obviously we had to, it couldn't come without child protection. Clearly it needed consultative process again, Joint Select Committee. We praise, as was previously done by the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South, Mrs. Faye Marshall Harris, our ambassador on child rights at the UN and other industrial places. She assisted me as well a lot in it. She had done, even before I became minister, a comprehensive paper on child justice and showing the severe defects in our legislative framework and what we should be doing to get us where we are today. And I have to also praise the Joint Select Committee, as I did last week, on the process which it went through and allowing the public to feed in and have their say on this legislation, even if many changes, few changes only were made. And so indulge me, please, to speak a bit of the Joint Select Committee process. We also have at the present time the Policy and Governance Committee looking into, Joint Select Committee of both Houses of Parliament looking into the cybercrime bill, sir. And the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I regret, sir, that he has not contributed. He could still come and contribute, sir, to this debate today. Perhaps it is that He said everything he had to say last week, has nothing more to say now. But he made some statements, that honourable member, on Sunday, sir. And I heard his voice. It wasn't that the news reported what he said. It was his voice on the cybercrime bill and the hearings that are going on now, because he's a member of the Joint Policy and Governance Committee. And last week, Monday, he was present and engaged the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, the Minister responsible for presenting the cybercrime bill in this Parliament. So he knows that what he said was not the truth on Sunday. When he spoke somewhere in Bridgetown, I believe, they said it's some Marcia Week's political meeting. Every week, the marching, the talking. And as I said last week, I protect their constitutional right to do that. But the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has a duty to this Parliament and to the people of Barbados not to perpetuate inveracities. If I was another place, I would say something else, but that would be unparliamentary in here. And I heard him say that the bill, cybercrime bill, is made only to deal with Barbadians that live here. And that we come in to lock up Bajans who live in Barbados. And that it does not speak to Bajans who live outside of Barbados. So I could not believe my ears. That a silk, someone who is a senior silk in this country, who knows better. I'm not saying that he ought to know better, because I know he knows better. He and I went through law school, law faculty together 40 years ago. I know that he knows better. I know that he knows he's not telling the truth, because we engaged him last Monday. He asked the Honourable Member for St. Michael Central a whole series of questions. Some of it on social media now. And the comments on the social media are that he behaved badly, he's a disgrace, etc., etc. So I know he knows that when Section 3(1) of the cybercrime bill as presently drafted, this act applies to an act done on a mission made by a, subset 3, by a national of Barbados outside the territory of Barbados, if that person's conduct would also constitute an offense under the law of the country where the offense was committed. Oh, Lord, you don't have to be a silk, not even an attorney at law, to understand that plain language. I'm really disappointed, sir, because that Honourable Member for Christchurch South engaged the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central on the issue. He asked her, does the United States of America have a cybercrime bill? The answer was yes. Does Canada have a cybercrime bill? The answer was yes. Does the United Kingdom have a cybercrime bill? The answer was yes. So in other words, Barbadians living in those countries, and we all know Europe had European Union members, 27 of them, obviously have cybercrime bill, because the Budapest Convention applied to all of them. So he knows that any Barbadian living in any of those countries, right, plus another 70 odd, because about 74 countries signed the Budapest Convention, have cybercrime piece legislation, and that this Section 3(1)(c) is clear that Barbadians living in any of those countries that have cybercrime legislation, that when we as well pass the Mutual Assistance Amendment Act together with the cybercrime bill, that Barbadians living in those countries will come under the cybercrime bill. But yet, I can hear his voice saying that this isn't true and that this bill brought to lock up Bajans living in Barbados. I totally condemn that kind of opposition politics. As I said last Tuesday, I understand what opposition politics is. I had 5 years, three months of it as part of the last decade when I was an opposition MP. But I always felt you do not try to be malicious. You don't try to play on the ignorance of barbarians. And I certainly feel I have a responsibility as a member of parliament to use the doctrine of the Right Honourable Tom Adams. Do not let a lie get ahead of you in politics, because you're going to have hell to catch up with it. I feel it's my responsibility as chairman of that committee to come here today to say that this kind of nonsense has to stop. Stop this kind of political foolishness I don't understand. Why suddenly having joined back the Democratic Labour Party for the second or third time supporting it, you got to now come and prey on the ignorance of barbarians to try to score foolish political points. No. We got to stop this. And we have a responsibility as honourable members of this House not to go out there and spread inveracities, which we know to be false. Has to stop. And I can tackle it every time once it falls under a purview that comes to me. So the purpose of the act, sir, the honourable member who led this debate spoke about it in compliance with international treaties and conventions of which we have signed on to, such as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So we have a bound duty to pass this legislation. As I said, we're late in doing it, but we've finally reached here. The issue of criminal responsibility, the age under which you cannot have criminal responsibility, is cleared up, so as 12. And that was an issue because in some spaces it said 14, under some legislations, under some practices. So now it's 12, that is fixed, below which a child is not capable of committing an offense. And similar to the Child Protection Act, sir, this piece of legislation has as its paramount consideration and importance the safety and welfare and well-being of the child. And the child shall, as far as possible, be given the opportunity to respond before any decision is taken which affects it. And you compare this to the situations which certainly prevailed up to recent times, that we had constituents whose parents, especially the mother, would go before a magistrate and say, I can't deal with this child. This child run a 12-year-old child or well, not 12, 13 or 14-year-old child, 15. I can't deal with this child. This child running about with men. I feel she having sex already, or in fact, I know she having sex, and I want her put in the girls' industrial school. That is what happens, sir. We know that's all of that done with this act now, with this piece of legislation. I got constituents that went in, girls' industrial school, under those circumstances. That's the truth. So the child has to be treated with respect and shall not be treated more severely than any adult would have been in the circumstances. I already mentioned about the 3-year minimum sentence. That gone through the headers now. And in fact, so when I became Home Affairs Minister in May 2018, there were about 50 or more boys and girls between the girls' industrial school and the boys at those reform or detention centers, I would want to call them. And I said, this is nonsense. And at some stage, I released a lot of them there. They told me how I couldn't release them before 27 months. In other words, 2 years, 3 months of the 3-year sentence. And I said, bring the files to me. I believe I might even have released some. It might even have, I might even have released some before the 27 months were up. But if I recall, when I demitted office as Home Affairs Minister, there were about 20 or so between boys and girls at the two institutions. And speaking with the Honourable Member for Christchurch East today, he told me there are only 6 now. Come down tremendously. Because the 12 now. Because the issue is this, and that Honourable Member was correct in his presentation today. He said that he never heard about any white person in those schools. Why even go further? I never hear about any middle economic income child there neither. It's only poor black people children that went there. And any piece of legislation that has as its fundamental core of penalization poor black people and poor black people children had to be fundamentally wrong. It had to be fundamentally wrong. And that was the effect. That no middle income child walking about at 10 o'clock in the night can come before the court the next morning and get put in any Dodds or girls' industrial school. So this is the context and the significant importance of what we're doing here today within child justice reform and indeed the whole reform of children and their protection. I take what the Honourable Member for St. John said in his presentation just before mine on parent education, and I already praised the Honourable Member for the City of finally getting off the ground the government's parent education program, something which I've been doing through my foundation, and I certainly take note, as I said, of what the Honourable Member for St. John said, that we have to capture young adults, teenagers, even before they become parents, in terms of education of their role as potential future parents. Children with disabilities under the legislation have a right to access to suitable equipment and assistive devices. And I trust that in implementing that, if any child with a disability, God forbid, were to end up in circumstances where they may have to be detained, that they will also be treated towards any special education and increased psychological support, which their circumstances as a child with disabilities may entail and may be required. So I just want to clear up one thing. When I said that it is had to be condemned that an honourable member of this parliament, far less holding constitutional office, ought not to prey on the ignorance of Barbadians. When I say ignorance, sir, I mean lack of knowledge. Because not everybody listens to us in here or follows debates, although there's been a lot of interest in the cybercrime bill. That is the truth. And that is good, because we want to engage the public, and we being transparent and accountable. But not everyone is going to be apprised of the bill or of any bill that comes here. And therefore, you can't take advantage of the lack of knowledge of our citizens and feed them with disinformation and abject lies. That is the truth. I regard that as taking advantage of innocent people and making them victims of what we are supposed to be doing in here. And that is passing legislation within the best interests of our people. And I totally condemn, as I said, any member who, knowing the oath that they take when they have to come in here, then goes, and because Barbadians or people in this country may not be fully apprised and aware and knowledgeable of what's going on, to come and say something that they know is not true. Even the statement about I think ministers, is it? Getting per diems of $1,000 a day. I would hope that ministers speak and clear that up, because I know for a fact that they get no more than US $200 per day. But no more than that. I think it's 185. Because when I was a minister, it was 185, I think, US, and I don't believe that that's gone up. See, even that kind of situation about how you get $1,000 a day and travel first class, where again, like I said, it'll have to be the ministers to think about. But I don't believe that it's first class at all. I think it is business class or over trips of 4 hours or 3 hours a time. So this kind of, as I say, I am disappointed, really and truly, in the Honourable Leader of the Opposition on these issues. The Probation Office will have a major role within the context of this bill. That there's a requirement under this legislation for a probation officer to within 24 hours after a child's apprehension, to become involved and to assess the child and to intervene on the part of the state in the child to try and keep the child now out of before the law courts. And that point is essential, because as the Honourable Member for St. George North said, this is Barbados. And all of us know about Barbados. That is how we get in here in the first place. And we know that in Barbados, don't mind you say that the newspapers can't report on a child in conflict with the justice system before the courts, but the village gonna know, and the word gonna spread. Lord, you know, XY child, Maisie child was before the court this morning, and then don't mind that. Say that after you serve your 3 years, that your record white clean. But this is Barbados. You're going to be known as a jailbird for the rest of your life. Don't mind you went in there at age 13 or 14. And everybody know, man, look, man, that is a Dodge boy. But I saw that they have people, and it visited on your children too. Because they would say, man, don't mind he fathered it a Dodge boy. Dodge, the government industrial school. So you want to try to keep a child out of the criminal justice system. And the probation office has a serious role in that, and I trust that the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs will ensure that the probation office is given the institutional strengthening, the numbers, the resources, the computerization, to make it fit for purpose for this legislation. Again, when I was minister, I know that we were embarking on reform of that office and looking to see how we can give it the resources to, in terms of numbers and computerization as well, included to deal with this bill. That was part of the implementation process that we were looking at to strengthen that department, because it's all right for us to come in here and pass laws, but we got to make sure that they are effective on enactment. So Section 11, for example, gives a lot of powers and duties to probation officers, which they can only fulfill if they have the numbers. And probation officers, for example, should assess a child within 96 hours prior to the child appearing at an initial inquiry relating to the child. Section 8. Issue of legal representation of the child is very important, sir. In other words, sir, a child must be able to retain your services as a silk if they want that and if they choose to. And therefore, the Section 65 provision, Clause 65 as it is now because it's still a bill, provision that legal representation of a child by the government at all stages of any administrative or criminal proceedings is important. And the magistrate has the authority to only direct detention of a child to the secure residential facility after they've taken into account the probation officer's recommendations. The issue of wandering, sir, that troubled me tremendously when I was Minister of Home Affairs. And yes, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East said, we had in the bill that I would have taken the Cabinet, May 2019, that Cabinet approved in principle, sir, that wandering will no longer be offence, as it is obviously now in this final version of the bill. Wandering again had to be unconstitutional. Had to be unconstitutional, sir. Again, you and I have spoken on this on many occasions. And it took the court, sir, Justice James, when he was in Barbados in March last year, to say that that offence was unconstitutional because it focused almost exclusively on girls. You never used to really hear about boys coming before the court and being sentenced to government industrial school for wandering. Girls of a particular socio-economic category, girls of a particular color. So it had to be unconstitutional. And the court correctly deemed it so, sir. That is the truth. Before Parliament could so deem. The issue of diversion, as we've heard throughout today, is so important and significant to this legislation, sir. And in Clause 34, it speaks to the opportunities that a child would be given now going forward after this act is passed in terms of options to keep it out of the detention center, the education, the counseling, the vocational training that a magistrate or even the probation officer, the state can say, well, look, you're going to do community service rather than go to detention. And in fact, the child or parent could specify the circumstances there, where they could say, well, I can give community service through the Lions Club, for instance, as part of my punishment rather than go to jail, rather than go to the detention center. The intervention of probation officers, the child, you could make an order that the child is prohibited from going in a particular district or lineman on the block rather than sentence the child to detention. All of these, and of course, the magistrate has the power to convert the hearing from a conflict of criminal justice system hearing to a child protection hearing under the Child Protection Act. And all of these are options in terms of this transformational piece of legislation, because in every way you're trying to prevent that child getting a criminal record and the stigmatization and adverse consequences which naturally flow from being subject to the criminal justice system. Imprisonment would only be a last resort. That sentence will not be imposed unless the child is 14 years or old at the time of commission of the offense. The issue of this legislation doing away, saying that there shall be no flogging, no corporal punishment or cruel and inhuman treatment of children, degrading treatment of any child in the detention center is so important, because one of the issues which confronted us, our administration, were allegations of children being beaten and corporal punishment and degrading treatment in breach of the international treaties that Barbados has signed. And we heard the Honourable Member for Christchurch East speak on that issue earlier. But certainly, any such treatment is now made illegal under this Act. And you have penalties as well in lieu of any fines or imprisonment for children. So, one of the last issues that I wish to speak about, sir, is the advisory board. And that was problematic too, because under the legislation that presently exists, there's an advisory board. And the role of that advisory board caused conflict previously under many administrations. What was their role? The law said they were to advise the minister, but a lot of advisory boards got into issues with trying to run the government in the industrial schools. And this piece of legislation clears that up with a child justice board, which it is clearly stated under the Act at Section 73 that board can or shall in fact give directions to the director of the facility on the management and supervision of the facility and as regards the welfare of the children, including their education, their training, conduct, safety, and recreation. So that issue should no longer arise as to what is the position of the board of whatever named at these detention centers. So this bill, this piece of legislation today is a day that certainly I have waited long to come before this Parliament and debate. It is socially transformative. It comes as a twin to the child protection legislation and as part of course, our social reform and our social welfare reform, sir, because the role of a member of Parliament, the role of a Parliament of Republican Barbados, sir, has to be what is in the best interest of the most vulnerable in this country, sir. And the children who came into conflict with the criminal justice system, sir, children in the first place are among the most vulnerable in this country, among the 4 most vulnerable people
Your
in this
Honourable
country.
can weigh in.
Yes, sir. Among the 4 most vulnerable people in this country. Children of poor people, sir, particularly poor single mothers, sir, among the most vulnerable. And this bill and the whole social welfare reform of this government speaks towards acting within their best interests. And these children being of paramount importance, sir, to the representatives, to their political representatives and this Parliament. And it comes as well together with educational reform, which as the Honourable Member for St. John said, has to come, sir, has to come. Reform of the 11+ and all of that. I know the Honourable Prime Minister spoke 5 years ago about the common entrance being abolished, and when she was Minister of Education, had a vision for educational reform. But I accept that Parliament and Cabinet has to pull the country along and can't move so far forward in front of the people. And therefore, educational reform, while it has to come, sir, may be taking a bit too long for some of us, sir. But certainly reform of curriculum and etc. has to come very, very soon. And is in the process of coming with teacher training in relation to reform of the curriculum. And we look forward as well to immigration reform, to prison reform, to other social reforms within this country, because that is what we are here to do, sir. And I am happy to be able to rise in support of this bill today. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I will just wrap up both in relation to both bills. I'm effectively wrapping up debate, sir, in relation to the report, but this will take into account the bills as well. Sir, I think the issues in relation, the comments and content of the child protection legislation has been more than adequately ventilated. I just wish to make a few clarifications in respect to the the child justice legislation. Sir, social media is an amazing thing when used properly. And I'm glad, sir, having spoken this morning, I got some feedback and there was some question in relation to the difference between the initial assessment of a child and the initial inquiry. I am glad, sir, that persons are indeed listening to be able to ask such a question. And this is an easy clarification, sir. The initial assessment, when an officer deems that a child is possibly in conflict with the law and they have the child in custody, for want of a better term, as the Honourable Member for St. James North said, it is incumbent upon them in the shortest possible time to engage a probation officer, and then they do the initial assessment of the child. Sir, the initial assessment is dealt with at clause 7 and 8 of the bill, and just for ease. So a police officer on apprehending a child shall promptly notify the parent of the child, or if the parent cannot be found an appropriate adult, of the apprehension of the child. Where the officer has notified the parent or appropriate adult of the apprehension, the police officer should then inform the child and the parent or appropriate adult in the presence of the child of the right of the child to be informed of the nature of offenses to have been committed by the child, to seek the advice of an attorney at law, to have a parent or appropriate adult present where the child is questioned, interviewed, or assessed in relation to the offense or offenses alleged to have been committed, that the child has the right to remain silent, and to be informed of the procedures to be followed pursuant to the Act and any other relevant enactment in force. And the police officer who has apprehended the child or any other police officer shall not later than 24 hours after the apprehension inform a probation officer of the apprehension. So once you take a child into custody, then you have to notify the parents in the shortest possible time. And in any event, you have to notify a probation officer within 24 hours, sir. Where a probation officer who receives a notification from the police that a child has been apprehended in accordance with Section 6, the probation officer shall assess the child in a place of assessment within 96 hours prior to the child appearing at the initial inquiry relating to that child. The probation officer may select a place of assessment. It does not have to be a police station, prior to or pending an initial inquiry regarding the child. And where the probation officer conducts an assessment of the child in conflict with the law, he should collect the information required for the preparation of the assessment report set out in subsection 4. And what is that information? The information, sir, is the name of the child, the age of the child, the offense alleged to have been committed by the child, name, address, and telephone number of the parent or appropriate adult, name, address, and telephone number of the attorney at law representing the child, whether the child has been released into custody of a parent or appropriate adult, is being detained in a place of safety, or is being detained in a secure residential facility, and any other information concerning the child which will assist the magistrate at the initial inquiry in determining the prospects of diversion, the possible release of the child into the care of a parent or the care of an appropriate adult if the child is in detention, and the placement where applicable of the child in a particular secure residential facility or in a place of safety, given due consideration to the age, physical and mental status of the child and the degree of the alleged offense. Where it appears to the probation officer the child does not intend to acknowledge responsibility for the alleged offense, this information shall be included in the assessment report, and the probation officer shall submit the assessment report to the magistrate conducting the initial inquiry prior to the commencement of the initial inquiry. That is different, sir, from the initial inquiry, in that the initial inquiry, which is dealt with at clause 24, I think I went through these objectives before. An initial inquiry should be held in respect of a child after an assessment is completed. That was the assessment we just spoke about. The appearance of a child at an initial inquiry before a magistrate shall be the equivalent of a first appearance before a court, and the objectives are to establish whether the matter can be diverted before a trial, identify a suitable diversion option where applicable, provide an opportunity for the prosecutor to assess whether there are sufficient grounds for the matter to proceed to trial, ensure that all available information relating to the child, his circumstances in the offense are considered in order to make a decision on diversion and placement of the child, and to ensure that the views of all persons required to be present pursuant to Section 25 shall be considered before a decision is taken. Also, to encourage the participation of the child and his parent or an appropriate adult in decisions concerning the child, and G, determine the release or placement of the child pending the conclusion of the initial inquiry or the appearance of the child in a court. Initial inquiry should be held in such place as the magistrate may determine, having regard to privacy and confidentiality. As we said, these are very important proceedings in relation to children. The magistrate shall conduct the proceedings in an informal manner by asking questions, interviewing persons at the initial inquiry and obtaining information. And the magistrate, in conducting proceedings in an informal manner pursuant to subsection 5, may seek the assistance of a social worker when asking questions, interviewing person in the initial inquiry, and obtaining information. So, in a nutshell, the initial assessment is done by a social worker, by a probation officer, following the apprehension of the child, and following the initial assessment, a report is provided by the probation officer to be sent to the magistrate who will hear the initial inquiry and then use the initial assessment to inform the court as to the correct proceedings in relation to the child. How can we deal with the matter? What is in the best interest of the child? So I thank the person who sent me that clarification. The initial assessment is done by a probation officer while the child has been under apprehension, and the initial inquiry is the inquiry done by the magistrate to decide whether to divert the child from the formal judicial proceedings or whether to proceed to trial or whether to employ some other option available under the law. So I hope that I've cleared that one up for the person who asked, and I thank you very much for supplying that question. Sir, just in terms of a general wrap-up, we're entering a new era in relation to the treatment of our children in relation to the law. It's a completely new dispensation. We have not been there before. The government can set up all the systems that the government wants to act in the best interest of the child, but at the end of the day, all of us who are stakeholders in the system and all who come into contact with the children need to understand that it is a continuing education process for us all. We need to suspend how we used to do business before and to adopt the new regime, to adopt a new philosophy, to understand that the guiding principles of one piece of legislation are care and safety and security of the child, and the next one is in relation to fairness and being able to give the child every possible opportunity to come out on the proper end of the judicial system. The mindset has to be different. As it stands now, sir, in any criminal proceedings, the mindset is to try to arrive at an answer, guilty or not guilty. That's it. We go through the entire process so that at the end of it, the principal player in the process can be found guilty or not guilty. This is a complete rethink, because in this, we're not governed by trying to get to a decision based on what the child has done and any allocation of guilt. The whole concept of guilt is one we're trying to get away from. The process under the child justice legislation is more aimed at helping the child to appreciate that they've done wrong, helping the child to confront and be mature enough to understand their consequences for their actions, helping the child to understand that it's not simply a finding of guilt that stigmatizes you or a punishment that wipes it away, but equally, if you hurt somebody, then you need to try to do good by them. It is the philosophy, sir, is being employed in the adult system as well, that we're not just looking at lick and lock up, we're not just looking at reform, we're also looking at restorative justice. How do we use the system to, at the end, balance out the interests of the parties so we achieve a win-win situation for everybody. This is a foreign concept to us in terms of child justice, and every player at every level of this needs to understand there has to be retraining and a change in philosophy. From the first police officer who comes into contact with the child, you need to understand it's not about frightening the child. It is about trying to get to the bottom of what is going on. Why do you do it? Do you understand you did wrong? For the probation officer who's doing the initial assessment, I am now doing an assessment now even before the child has come in to conflict with the court, before the child has come before a judicial officer. I am now doing an initial assessment to assist the judicial officer in seeing if there's another way we can deal with it. When the child comes before the judicial officer, in this case the magistrate, the child will then understand, or the magistrate needs to understand, that I now need to come down to the level of that child. My aim is not to get through this as quickly as possible. It's not just to assign a stigma or assign a label of guilty or not guilty and then let somebody else deal with that child. It is for me to try to help the child to come to grips with what is done, accept what is done, accept their role in what is done, have a willingness to make good on it, and come out on the other end without having to formally engage the system. And every opportunity at that stage is provided, sir, to divert from there. So we, all of us, need to change the way we think. In the child protection legislation, sir, it's a mandatory reporting. The mandatory reporting is something that is against the culture of Barbados. Actually, quite frankly, in many instances, getting involved is against the culture of Barbados. Barbadians like to know everything. We want to know everything, but we don't necessarily want to be the body to tell. We may see something, but we don't want to get involved. We may see somebody doing wrong, but that's not my business. I don't want to tell out honey or she. Where we're dealing with our children, we've accepted that the world and the best practices have moved on far. When I was a child, sir, I used to hold some warm legs. Like, I smile sometimes to hear the stories of my colleagues because I thought quite often that I had a particular penchant for bad behavior and finding myself in mischief. But I've now realized, sir, that almost everybody in here was in the exact same boat as me. Some skated a little bit closer to the judicial system than I did, right? But the fact is, there's mischief in children, and I don't mean mischief in a bad sense. Children will be children. They will push the envelope. They're curious. Sometimes our curiosity gets us into places that we would rather not be, right? We need to understand now that our philosophy as a country is not in institutionalizing children. It is not in stigmatizing children. It is not even necessarily in punishing children. But we preach conflict resolution at the level of adults. We're trying to encourage our adults to stop fighting, to resolve things differently. The Peace Program tries to enforce positive virtues in our young people and channel their energies in constructive and productive ways. Most of our programs under the Ministry of Youth, sir, are geared at engaging our young people positively and trying to help them to help others. The whole ethos, the whole approach of this government has been towards let us build societies. Let us build societies. Let us pull everybody up to the standard that we want to see across our society and help to keep them there. Let us provide the opportunities that might not necessarily exist in their own personal circumstances to help them to believe that they can be their best self across the board. That has been the guiding principle, or one of the guiding principles of this government, and it is ably and completely reflected, sir, in these two pieces of legislation. I am happy. I am proud to have been a part of it. I see finally, sir, the light at the end of the tunnel. This process was difficult on all concerned. I'm sure when the Honourable Member for St. George North was selected as the chair of the select committee, nowhere in her thought process or any of the others who were appointed to that committee did they envision the amount of work paperwork, minutes, notes, cross-referencing, research that they would have had to have done. And effectively, sir, to produce the report, I asked the clerk to print the report for me. And I had to say to her, well, not the entire thing, but print select sections. My wife, God bless her, this morning I said to her, can you convert this document from PDF into Word? And I asked her back about 15 minutes later, what, you didn't hear me? She goes, come. And she called me to her computer. And the taskbar, sir, had just moved a fraction. Apparently 800 pages is a lot of PDF. But the bottom line is a lot of work was done in this. And we have thanked all of the major players in it. We have thanked the consultants, the institutions, the members of the committees. But you know what? Something like this goes past those persons. Something like this requires the assistance of the Office of the Clerk of Parliament and their staff, who didn't sign off for this either, who worked late into the night, who had a lot of other work, who were available after hours on weekends for calls to check this or amend that. So the police officers, you know, nothing can happen in Parliament without the police officers being here. So all of them who are accustomed going home and turning up for Parliament on a Tuesday and Senate on a Wednesday had to be pulling extra shifts to cover the work that was being done. The security guards, sir, the IT people for Parliament, because all of it had to be videoed. I think it was streamed in some instances. So the whole, everybody, down to the caterers, everybody that put in the extra effort to ensure not only that we got to the end of it, not only that we were able to accommodate all of every view that wished to contend in Barbados, not only that we were able to produce a report, sir, that is par excellence, not only that we were able to produce the legislation, but, sir, that we were able to at all times keep the public of Barbados engaged and informed. Anybody that has any residual confusion after this entire process up to this minute about the applicability or the terms or the reach of either the child protection legislation or the child justice legislation, sir, is in that position now because they choose to be, not because they did not have the chance to become fully informed. So having said all of that, I want to thank my colleagues who contributed to the debate. The debate in this was of a seriously high standard. Everybody was interested. This was not a case where you had fragmented interest groups in Parliament. All of us were children. All of us know children. Some of us have children. Some of us have more children than others. Some of us have godchildren. But everybody was interested in this because at the end of the day, this was probably one of the most transformative suites of legislation that we have done as a Parliament or that we are likely to do in our term in office. So I wish to thank all who played a part. And with those words, sir, I wish to move that the bills be read. Sorry.
The report, Honourable.
I wish to move that the report be adopted in its entirety without reservation.
Question is that the report be adopted. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The report is so adopted.
No. Be going through the clauses, we'll do them back.
One by one. Do them one by one.
Again. So what I'm gonna do now is let me turn off. Order number 2, sir. To resume debate on the second reading of the Child Protection Bill 2024 as amended.
All members to mic yourself.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Questions that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honorable members to mic yourself.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the bill and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, this bill would already have gone to a committee. So we are recommitting, and that committee would have made their amendments, which we just adopted. So we're going back into committee to make further amendments. But we're only going specifically to those amendments. We're not going to go down how we normally do the entire bill. Only those amendments we're going to deal with. So the recommitting.
So noted.
So, at part 1, clauses 1 to 7, there's an amendment at clause 2.
Sir, in clause 2, the definition of former act, delete the words section 68 and substitute the words section 71. Right, I beg to move that clause to be amended. Stand part as amended.
The question is, clause 2, stand part as amended. All honourable members in favor, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 22 to 31, there's an amendment at clause 24-7.
Chairman, I wish to make the correction to clause 24-7 and substitute the following. A person who contravenes subsection 2 is liable to pay to the director an administrative penalty of $5,000. I therefore move that clause 2 stand part as amended. Clause 24-7 stand part as amended, sorry.
The question is that clause 24-7 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favor, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 51 to 59, there is an amendment at clause 52-7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that we amend clause 52-7 by deleting the words 2, 3, 5, or and also, sir, to amend clause 56.5. Mr. Chair, I therefore move that clause 52.7 stand part as amended.
Is that clause 52.7 stand part as amended? All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 56.5.
Mr. Chair, we amend clause 56.5 by deleting the words 2, 3, or 4 and substituting the words 2 or 3. I therefore move that clause 56.5 stand part as amended.
The question is that clause 56.5 stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Sir, there's an amendment immediately after clause 59, which would then be the new clause 60.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment reads as follows. Administrative penalty notice 61. The director shall issue an administrative penalty notice in writing to any person where the director is satisfied that the person has contravened the section to which this part applies. 62. An administrative penalty notice shall specify the nature of the act constituting the contravention, the penalty to be paid, and shall require the person to whom it is addressed to pay the penalty within 30 days of the date of the notice. 3. A person who is in receipt of an administrative penalty notice issued pursuant to subsection 1 shall pay the amount of the penalty set out in the notice on or before the date specified in the notice. At 61, notwithstanding section 60, a person to whom an administrative penalty notice is addressed and who wishes to challenge the alleged contravention may, instead of paying the amount of the administrative penalty, appeal to the judge in chambers who may remit or vary the amount of the penalty, and the decision of the judge shall be final. At 62, the amount of an outstanding administrative penalty constitutes a debt to the state and is recoverable in civil proceedings before a magistrate for District A. At 6, the existing part 6 and subsequent part shall be... Don't need to read it? Okay. Mr. Chair, I therefore move that part 6 be stand part and be amended, and stand part as amended. Thank you.
The question is that part 6 stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, because we would have inserted a new clause immediately after 59, the clauses are there to indicate those amendments.
Mr. Chair, the existing part 6 and subsequent parts shall be renumbered given the changes, so accordingly, the existing clause 60 and subsequent clauses shall also be renumbered accordingly. 7. In the second schedule, delete the section reference at the top right-hand corner, section 69, and substitute the words section 72. I move that this section stand part as amended.
The question is that the aforementioned section stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, for clarity, as I said before, the second schedule is amended by deleting the section reference at the top right-hand corner, section 69, and substitute the word section 72. I therefore move that this section stand part as amended.
The question is, the second schedule stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker, the passing of one bill in committee with amendments.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill with amendments in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable St. Michael South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Child Protection Act 2024.
Question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 3, sir. In the name of the Honorable Acting Attorney General, Minister of Home Affairs and Information, to resume the debate on the second reading of the Child Justice Bill in 2024 as amended.
Honorable Christchurch, please.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read for a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated earlier in relation to the Child Protection Bill, this bill also went before that committee. That committee would have made certain amendments which were adopted by our report just now. So in relation to these amendments, we are only going specifically to those amendments that we have made subsequent to the committee. Therefore, Part 5, clauses 24 to 41, there is an amendment 28-1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move with respect to 28.1 that it be deleted, the current clause be deleted and substituted with the following. A parent or appropriate adult who has been directed to appear at an initial inquiry and who fails to do so is liable to pay an administrative penalty of $5,000 to the Director of Child Protection. I beg to move, sir, that this clause stand par as amended.
The question is that the fourth clause stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 29-5.
Sir, I beg to move that clause 29.5 in its current form be deleted and the following be substituted. A parent or appropriate adult into whose care a child is placed who fails to comply with the direction issued under subsection 4 is liable to pay an administrative penalty of $5,000 to the Director of Child Protection. I beg to move that this clause stand par as amended.
The question is that the aforementioned clause stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 42 to 49. There is an amendment at clause 49-6.
In clause 41.6, sir, I beg to move that the words 49.6, I beg to move that the words $5,000 be deleted and substituted with the words $10,000. And I beg to move that the clause stand part now as amended.
The question is that the aforementioned clause stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, there's an amendment, a further amendment, inserting a new clause, but after clause 108.
The amendment, sir, is to create a new Part 8 administrative penalties, and I'll just read the amendments.
Part 12.
Clause 12, sorry. Part 12. My Roman is a little bit off today. Sir, the sections, administrative penalty, section 109. A person who contravenes a provision as set out in Part 1 of the 6th schedule is liable to pay to the Director of Child Protection an administrative penalty in the amount so specified in the 6th schedule. Part 110, which is administrative penalty notice, subsection 1. The Director of Child Protection shall issue an administrative penalty notice in the form set out in Part 2 of the 6th schedule to any person where the Director of Child Protection is satisfied that the person has contravened a provision set out in Part 1 of the 6th schedule. Subclause 2, an administrative penalty notice shall specify the nature of the act constituting the contravention, the penalty to be paid, and shall require the person to whom it is addressed to pay the penalty within 30 days of the date of the said notice. Subclause 3, a person who is in receipt of an administrative penalty notice issued pursuant to subsection 1 shall pay the amount of the penalty set out in the notice on or before the date specified in the notice. Clause 111, procedure for challenging an alleged administrative contravention. Notwithstanding section 109, a person to whom an administrative penalty notice is addressed and who wishes to challenge the alleged contravention may, instead of paying the amount of the administrative penalty, appeal to a judge in chambers who may remit or vary the penalty and whose decision shall be final. Clause 112, administrative penalty to constitute a debt to the state. The amount of an outstanding administrative penalty constitutes a debt to the state and is recoverable in civil proceedings before a magistrate for District A. I beg to move, sir, that those clauses 109 to 112 stand par as amended.
The question is that clauses 109 to 112 stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, because of the insertion of the new clause, the existing clauses will be renumbered as well as the existing part. So part 12 and the subsequent part should be renumbered. The existing clause 109 and the subsequent clauses shall also be renumbered. And we then go to the schedules. First schedule.
First.
Just to have the parts and the clauses approved, the renumbering.
Sir, the existing part 12 and subsequent parts be renumbered as made sense following the amendment, sir. Existing clause 109 and subsequent clauses shall also be renumbered accordingly. In the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth schedules, sir, we delete 110 from the section reference at the top right-hand corner and substitute 114. We insert the form appended to the document, to this document, sir, as the sixth schedule. The existing sixth schedule now be renumbered the seventh schedule. And in the seventh schedule, as renumbered, delete the section reference at the top right-hand corner, section 112, and substitute section 116. I beg, sir, to move that these parts be amended, stand part as amended.
The question is that the aforementioned parts, schedule parts be amended, I beg to move that the aforementioned parts stand as amended, stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Sir.
Sir, I beg to move, sir, that the first
Schedule. The first schedule.
first schedule be amended, and stand part is amended.
The question is that the first schedule stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
The question is that the second schedule stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Sir, I beg to move the third schedule stand part as amended.
The question is that the third schedule stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Fourth schedule.
Sir, I beg to move the fourth schedule stand part as amended, sir.
The question is that the fourth schedule stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The fifth schedule.
Sir, I beg to move that the fifth schedule stand part as amended and that all the schedules, sir, be the schedules as indicated to the bill.
The question is that the fifth schedule stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The sixth schedule.
I did the sixth just now. Oh, sorry, sir. I beg to move, sir, the sixth schedule stand part as amended and be the sixth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the sixth schedule stand part as amended. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The seventh schedule.
Sir, I beg to move the seventh schedule stand part as amended and be the seventh schedule to the bill.
The question is that the seventh schedule stand part as amended and be the seventh schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Sir, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report the passing of one bill in committee to His Honor the Speaker. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable member for Christchurch East.
Sir, I beg to move
Bill read it.
that the bill be read the third time, sir.
The question is that the bill be ready a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Sir, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Child Justice Act 2024.
Question is that the bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable member for Christchurch East.
Sir, with this, we've come to the end of what has been a long, extended session, sir, for the consideration of the two pieces of legislation. I beg to move, sir, the adjournment of the House until Friday, the 7th day of June, 2024 at 10 in the forenoon.
The question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until Friday, the 7th day of June, 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 7th day of June, 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.